Hey guys, in this episode, I've got Hayden Croxall with Croxall Construction Companies joining me. He started his painting business in 2019 on the side while working as a teacher full time. He kept it on the side for 2019, 2020, 2021, and finally went full time in 2022. His business is doing almost $2 million a year now with a director who runs the whole thing. He's launched a roofing company, a residential construction company, and part of his whole family of companies is also a commercial construction company. And they're doing almost $10 million a year now. And the dude's got 9 kids. On this episode, we're going to talk about life balance, how to live an intentional life, and how he built his business. I hope you enjoy the episode. I think it's a great conversation that I think you can take a lot away from. Enjoy. You'll get a lot from listening to. So, Hayden, welcome. Thanks for chatting with me today, my man.
Thanks, Eric. Man, it's an honor to be here.
So let's start with the new news I just heard from you moments ago, which is I thought you had 2 companies. I thought it would, and then you just informed me that you actually have 4, and that you're now on pace for about 10 million. So walk us through like what your setup is these days.
Yeah, it's been an adjustment, and I feel like every year the role is shifting. And I know we'll talk about the work-life balance, but figuring out how each new role works with that is it's a challenge, but it's worth taking the time to do it. Right now, my role is president of our holding company, and so our holding company is Croxall Construction Companies. That company owns our painting company, our residential construction company, commercial construction company, and then roofing company that we are officially launching here in like the next week. And so that's kind of what we've got going on. I'm partnered with my brother. My dad started in construction back in '07, and so kind of set the groundwork for us. And this is where we are today. In addition, we have a properties company, me, my dad, and my brother, where different kind of investments, residential and commercial, where those go. And so that's what it looks like. My dad's the CEO of the holding company, and my brother's the director of our commercial construction company. And so it keeps us busy.
Nice, man. And so define your role as president. So, because I just heard you mention your dad's actually CEO of Croxall Construction Companies.
Yeah.
And then you said your brother does what? Your brother's what?
He's the director of our commercial construction company.
Okay. And then you're president. So what do you do as the president?
Yeah. So my role, it's kind of 3 things: vision, sales, and systems. And so as I've stepped into this role, I've been able to also take a step kind of into the commercial and help implement some new systems over there. My dad has built that company really well. We have a really good reputation in the community. We have some awesome guys over there. And now kind of what I'm doing is stepping in and saying, hey, operationally, what kind of systems can we implement that allow for us to operate more efficiently? I kind of took what I've done in the painting company and in the residential construction company and just setting that over there. I oversee a lot of our networking, and so from that standpoint, sales on larger projects, and then vision looking forward 3, 5, 10 years from now. My dad is 60 now, and I joke with him that CEO is the CEO that he really wants is chief entertainment officer, and so his goals, primary role wise would be pickleball, hunting, fishing, traveling, and so me and my brother are kind of working with him on trying to make that a reality, because he's worked hard and has earned it.
So, dude, some of this is news, obviously, with the growth, to me. So let's actually go back, because I know you had kind of a unique story on how you even got into this. I mean, you didn't envision. How long ago did you start your first company?
5 years, coming up on April Fool's Day.
Okay, awesome, so nice. You had a memorable,
it was kind of a big joke, really.
And, well, your joke was turning out all right.
Yeah, it has. Now, so I grew up the son of an entrepreneur, and I mean, he's always worked hard, and I mean, through the recession, even going through some difficult things. I mean, he's always set an example of what it means to operate with integrity and work ethic, and to love his family well through it all. And so I had that example, and it's one that I'm extremely thankful for. And he kind of had laid it out to where, hey, if you want to come work with me in construction, you can. And I said, like a good son, no. So I decided I was going to go do something totally different. He worked hard to lay it out, and I was like, no, I'm going to go be a teacher. And so I went to school for teaching, and that's because I wanted to do something purposeful. And it was. I ended up teaching for 5.5 years. Graduated back in 2016, and really loved what I did. I taught English to speakers of other languages. So I worked with our immigrant population, which ended up tying into all of this. And so that was a really great experience. But by 2019, I was married. I had 2 sons, and my wife was staying home. And I realized that our bank account was trending in the wrong direction on my teacher salary. And so I realized I had to do something to stop that trend. And I tried doing yard work, just kind of whatever side hustle I could. And then one day I was just like, well, maybe I'll go start a painting company, because I figured it was the out of all the construction trades, it was the one with the least amount of liability. Because I was like, if we paint it wrong, we'll just paint it again. And I remember at the time I didn't actually know what sheen meant, which that's kind of an important thing to know in painting. So I didn't really know what I was getting into, but I approached my dad and I said, hey, if I can put together some, a crew, could we try to paint some of your projects? And he told me no, but he would try to hook me up with maybe some clients who needed some painting services. So that's what I did. I would, first season was tough. I mean, year one was hard, because I'd go teach 8 to 4, and then I would leave teaching and drive and paint from 5 to midnight. I had some guys I knew who would moonlight with me from another painting company. So they would go do their shift, and then they'd come work with me, and did that for the first little while. And then I started subbing, and during the summer. So I was really busy that summer trying to do jobs. And so I was selling, I was project managing, I was doing some of the work myself. And then come that fall, I went back to school. And so then it was wake up at 6 a.m., load up my younger brother's truck, and which I borrowed because I didn't have a truck. And I'd go drop off the materials, tools, get this crew started, go teach. After teaching, I would coach. And after coaching, I would go check on the job site, load up stuff. And so that was year one. And so I think we did around 140 year one, okay. And paid a lot for experience on some houses because I didn't really know what I was doing. So profitability wise, we were not that great, but I learned a lot, and that kind of set a groundwork going forward. And
so then from there, man, how long? Because you just focused on the painting business for at least a couple years, right? Because when I even started talking to you, you were when we started talking a year and change ago, you were still mostly focused on the painting business, I think.
Yeah. So 2020, I started my own crew, and because I was like, hey, I want an in-house quality, focus on that. Well, then COVID hit, and that kind of blew up residential painting. But then a month later, a tornado actually hit Chattanooga, where I live. And so I saw all of these out-of-town storm chasers coming in. And I remember I was doing tornado cleanup. And I remember thinking, I don't think that they have the best intentions in mind of my city. And so a week after the tornadoes, I decided, hey, I'm going to do roofing too. And I remember going home and I Googled, what is a roofing square, which is an important metric in roofing. But I think the big thing was that I knew, even if I didn't know everything, I could find people who did. And And I think that the cool thing with entrepreneurship is it's really about identifying a problem and a solution, connecting the two and facilitating the experience. And so 2020, I ended up doing roofing as well. And that kind of helped float us through that initial COVID phase where it'd be Friday, my 2-man crew, which were the only employees I had at the time, they'd be wrapping up work. And I didn't know where I was going to send them Monday, but I wanted to keep them paid. And so we were doing jobs at a loss there, but the roofing helped float it so that I could keep them paid. Then in June 2020 was a year. Our youngest, or our first biological daughter was born, and she had a heart defect. And so everything got upended with that. And so we ended up spending 2 months away from Chattanooga. Had to leave our 2 boys back home with my parents between Atlanta and then Boston Children's, where she had open heart surgery. And that ended up kind of facilitating something that really needed to happen, which was me firing myself from a technician role. Because I was out there with a fire extinguisher, I was selling the jobs, I was managing the jobs, and all of a sudden I wasn't even there. And so my brother-in-law came on, and he would project manage for me. He would go to the estimates, take pictures, send them to me, and then I'd build out the estimates and price it out. And we ended up in 2020 doing 380 at the end of the year. So we doubled, actually more than doubled in 2020. And I really started kind of understanding, hey, I don't have to be there for it to happen.
Yeah.
And
not
that was a game changer.
Not the ideal thing to force your hand, with your daughter. And that all worked out with her?
It did, man. She is a 3-year-old sassy, sweet princess now. So we're very thankful.
Yeah, man. Thank God. But, there's a great business lesson in there, which is like, all of a sudden you can't do certain things and your business grows. And sometimes you need, I've got a video I'm just about to film that's about that, where it's like, look, if you broke both your arms and you couldn't paint, you'd figure it out and your business would grow.
Yeah. Oh, 100%.
Maybe you need, sometimes like you need to rip that Band-Aid off. Like you have to progress to that next level because your business does more when you do the more valuable things. So really cool. So even though it's a crazy year, so you went from 140 to 380, and then where'd you go from there?
Yeah, the next year. And so at that point I realized, hey, I don't even have to be on the job sites really. My brother-in-law came on full time, and we went from 380 to about 820 the next year. And at the end of that year, so we got back into fostering. We had fostered back in 2017. We got back into fostering in 2021. And we got in July of that year, our now youngest son. And then through meeting him, he had 4 older siblings who we got to meet. And so I was teaching and I was doing the painting thing, and it was just too much. And so I ended up leaving painting. I left teaching in December 21, went full on into entrepreneurship 22, and our family grew from 4 to 8 in January. So, so I had a little bit of a fire underneath me to keep me going because there were a lot of mouths to feed. But a big focus for us in 2022, because we doubled in 21, which was awesome. But something that my dad's always harped on is it's not what you make, it's what you keep. And so we focused more on, okay, how do we focus on profitability as opposed to just our gross revenue? And so we shifted our pricing model, and we ended up going from 820 to 1.25 that year, but our net ended up doubling. So we saw 50% gross revenue growth within 100% net revenue growth. And that was really big for us. And 22 was a great year economically. We started seeing things trend. Starting in Q3, the residential market started dropping because that was when recession talks started picking up. And we saw that. I mean, we can go into our QuickBooks, and it was just started tanking. And so 23, I started it thinking, hey, we're just gonna stick with 1.25 as our goal. But what we ended up seeing was that there was an avenue to move into commercial. And so we ended up doing that heavily last year. And we wrapped up the year at 1.6 is what we wrapped up. And we were at 60% commercial after being 90% residential in 22. And so that was a big shift for us. But at this point, we're not looking back. The commercial's been really great.
Yeah. There's not a lot of people who go from commercial to residential. That tells you tells you something, like,
for sure.
We're starting to beat that drum more and more. Like, you never hear commercial painting contractors being like, "Man, how do you break into residential?" It's like, no, that's like going backwards,
Yeah, I know. And but yeah, I did the roofing thing back in 2020. In 2021, we started throwing some flooring into what we were doing, because we'd have these people moving into their houses and they'd say, hey, a flooring contractor who can refinish our floors? And I was like, well, refinishing your floor is basically painting your floor just with a stain. And so we ended up getting a sub crew in and started selling some jobs there as well. And then in 22, when I left teaching, I started an exteriors company with a buddy of mine. And I started that one with the wrong mentality. The idea was he's going to run it and I'm going to do hands off. But you can't start a business without being invested in it and having systems in place. And so I realized now that I did not, because he didn't have a background in it. And so I did not set him up for success. And so that company didn't do well. But through that, I got into the commercial roofing space and ended up winning a pretty good sized commercial roof job. So I got my GC license in preparation for that. And then my dad, he was mostly in commercial construction. And so kind of through conversations, he said, well, have you thought about getting into residential construction? Because people would ask me, hey, do you know somebody who can do this? And I say, well, my dad's too busy. And then we don't do it because we just paint roof and floor. And so I was like, well, I got my GC now, might as well do it. And so in the end of 22, ended up bringing on one of my best friends. And it was awesome because my pitch to him was, I have 0 jobs lined up right now. I have a commercial roofing job, and I think I'll be able to pay some of your salary with the proceeds from that. Do you want to come work with me? And but thankfully he did, because he's awesome. And so he's the director of our residential construction company now. Okay. And so last year was a lot of focus on building that company up. And then as we wrapped up last year, we decided, me and my brother and my dad, to do the holding company and put all these other companies underneath it. Wild,
man. All right. So I can't believe you were doing teaching for the first 2 to 3 years of that. That's pretty crazy. And then you ended teaching in 2021, it sounds like. So 22 was your first full year not teaching. And so now you've got, who runs the painting business now?
Yeah, so we have a new director who just started in February, and he's been awesome. He's got, I shifted my approach, and instead of hiring for experience, hiring for character and work ethic. And so he served in the police force for 8 years, and that was the bulk of his career. And so he's got a lot of leadership and discipline and character. And so I was like, hey, any interest in coming and running a painting company? And so he's jumped in and again, just been awesome. I meet with them twice a week, and that's kind of the bulk of my direct involvement with the painting company right now, except when it comes to really large scale commercial projects. I'll step in on the sales side of that.
Great, man. All right. Well, there's a couple of things that I heard that we could kind of jump into that I think would be valuable. One would be how you put directors in place to run companies, because that's a unique thing that I think a lot of people don't know how to do, would be nervous to do. Obviously you got best friends and family, but then you've got this new guy who's running the painting company. So I'd be curious to dig in a little bit to just how you basically are handing off operations of a whole company within a couple of years. Not an easy thing to do. That's super unique. Mm-hmm. If you weren't aware that that's a unique thing about you, I think that's always good to know. Second thing that might be interesting to touch on is just like networking. That's something I think that's probably a gift for you as well, with the large commercial roofing project you landed, the transition to commercial painting. Obviously, your dad's probably influenced you a little bit with all the commercial construction. Has a little bit of an insight there. So I think that would be interesting to talk about. And then, of course, work-life, balance and the big transition that happened for you around that. So let's actually start there, man. Like, what was it? I know that transition was roughly a year ago when you started to really take more control over your schedule and time in life, I think, but you can correct any of this. Why don't you give me the quick kind of before and what it's like now? And then let's dig into that. And then we can wrap up with those other two topics.
Yeah, man, absolutely. And I remember beginning of 22, I read the book 4 Hour Work Week. And there's a lot of principles in it that I think are great, but that probably wasn't the best book for me to read going into full-time entrepreneurship, because I was like, I need to try not to work. And I think the shift that I've undergone largely through working with mentors and kind of seeing what all they've done is recognizing that there's seasons. Entrepreneurship is seasonal. There's some seasons where my capacity has to be a little bit heavier on the organization. And then there's seasons where my capacity it doesn't have to be as focused there. If we have a big project that we're trying to land, I might put in some extra hours that week, really focusing on making sure our team is prepped and that we've got everything that we need to make that happen. Or if we have a project that's going on that's a high dollar or high value project, ensuring that one gets taken care of thoroughly. But then having a landing zone kind of, because it's easy as an entrepreneur just to get into the work all the time, put off everything else. I'm working to create a better future for my family, which has merit. But at the same time, I just turned 30. The next 10 years are the longest decade that I'll have my children in my home. And so if I spend all my time working right now, focused on creating a better future, I'm missing this time right now that I have with them. And so having that really at the forefront has been crucial. And then just setting those landing zones. Like last year, I was working pretty heavily on the residential company, getting that one built up, focusing on the sales side, building our reputation, building our systems, and then kind of towards the end, and then I was also building our house, and so that was an additional thing. And we got to the end of last year, and that was like my landing zone, where I was able to have like 3 months where I was just able to enjoy and rest and kind of take still working, but not as kind of go. And then we picked back up, getting this holding company in place and really focusing on how are we going to systemize our commercial construction company for future growth. And so I've kind of got like a 3-month window where I'm like, hey, I'm going to be a little heavier involved. And where I think that the work-life balance really comes into place is, and what I loved about your course and my biggest takeaway from it was that design your life component, where I went in and I said, hey, this is who I am. I kind of started with these identity statements of I am a faithful husband. I'm an intentional father. And I said, hey, these are the things. This is who I am. What does that mean in terms of what do I do based off of that? And then what was so cool about, again, that practice was then, well, if this is what I do, how do I make my calendar reflect that? And so my calendar, which I now live by, because I came into your course thinking, how am I supposed to organize my week? I'm an entrepreneur, like things come up, like you can't organize it. But I've actually realized, no, actually I can. I can organize for the unpredictable, or I can plan for the unpredictable, and that's been huge. And so I live by my calendar, and I've got little things kind of built in there. It's like Friday mornings, I've got a little extra time where I can either help my wife with some of the kids or take the kids out for a short little field trip or whatever. And then Monday mornings and Tuesday mornings and Thursday mornings, I take some of our kids to school, and all that's on the calendar. And because it's on the calendar, it can be protected. And then everything else is regimented. I don't flex. And so if somebody says, hey, you want to meet up? I say, yes, here's the available dates. And usually it's a couple weeks in advance, because and I do all of that so that I don't have anything on my calendar after 5 o'clock during the week, because my primary goal is to love my wife and love my children well. And that means that I have to create that margin. And so I'll strive to be efficient and perform well during those work hours. And there are times where, hey, kids go to bed and I tell my wife, hey, we've got this coming up. I really need to focus on that. But having that schedule built out kind of gives me a foundation for it all. And so that's been game changer.
Yeah, it's amazing. So you got after 5 is work free until maybe the kids are asleep. There might be something you work on after everybody's in bed. That's pretty much your weekdays after 5.
Yeah, and there, because we have a lot of kids, and so some of them are in different schools and stuff, and so sometimes I'm getting home 5:30, and if there's a meeting that runs a little bit late, sometimes I might get home 6. But I try to, like, the bedtime routine is my time with my kids. So I handle the bedtime routine because I help them brush their teeth, they get their pajamas on, and we read and we pray together. And then they have their individual kind of bedtimes. And that's just important to me. And so we don't do like a ton of like extracurricular stuff. Like our evenings aren't, over here and over here and over here. This is our family time. And we really protect that.
Yeah. So you've got your evenings protected. You've got a few days a week where you're with the kids in the morning, you're taking them to school. What about weekends?
Yeah, as far as like going to job sites, and we set expectations on the front end with clients, and because I don't manage any projects, but I'm a touch point with a lot of our clients from a relational standpoint, and with all of our employees, product managers, directors, try to set the expectation on the front end, like, hey, these guys are focused from 8 to 5, Monday through Friday. Weekends, you probably will not get a response from them. And with that said, they've got my number if there's an emergency. So there's times where I might field an email, field a text, field a phone call on a Saturday, but it really doesn't happen a ton. And I think that's largely because of expectations that are set on the front end. Yeah. Our commercial company, I mean, there's times where we have some weekend kind of shutdown projects going on. And those are times where you have to be, again, it's that season.
It's the exception though, more than the rule.
Exactly. Yeah. And so, Friday nights, we call it family fun night. So it's that / Sabbath. And that's like, I don't care what could be going on in the world. I don't care what party's going on. Like, that's like, we're together. It's me, my wife, and my kids. We have a meal, we watch a movie, we play. And so having those cadences and that routine, I think kind of allows for the rest to take place that needs to. So then when I'm working, I'm working. And I'm striving to be efficient with that time.
Yeah. So just doing some math, I know you've got seasons. I agree with you. There's busier times and not busy times. For me, summers, I mean, ironically, I run a whole bunch of painting companies and stuff, but summer's not that busy for me.
Oh yeah.
Mostly because that's when my kids are available. We got 4th of July, we've got a couple trips we do. They've got a couple weeks off from school. Like, I take a lot of time off during that time. And actually all the companies are so busy that I don't need to do, like, I almost get in the way. They're like, we just got to work, Eric, like leave us alone, which is all right. This is my busiest time, which is like springtime, setting a lot of things up, building, pushing things forward, getting a lot of momentum going. But how's that vary for you? Like from hey, when I'm not like in a super busy season, I'm working this many hours a week. And if I'm really busy, I'm working this many hours a week. Like, do you have like a range that you feel like you typically find yourself in?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. And with the shift that my role's undergone, like I've had to redo my calendar 3 separate times since last spring, just because I'm like, okay, well now these are my responsibilities. Well, now these are mine.
Redoing mine in 2 weeks. I mean, that's evolution, right? If what you do with your schedule and time is not changing much, then your results aren't changing much. So if you want a big shift in results, then you need to see a big shift in your calendar, because results are a function of action. And if your actions don't change much, the results don't change much. So I think that's important that you're making those shifts. And I think it would be impossible for you to have the kind of growth curve that you have right now if your schedule wasn't changing that much.
Yeah, for sure. And already I was thinking about this earlier today, because we have the roofing company is launching, and I'm bringing on a sales and project manager in May. And I was like, okay, I'm going to have to go back in and make an adjustment to really work with him and get systems implemented. But yeah, I mean, there's some seasons like this summer, I'll be in Norway for 2.5, 3 weeks. And I'll probably be working 15, 20 hours during that season. Whereas, there's others where, again, if there's a lot going on, then I might be closer to 50, 60. If it's a big project or big sale that we're trying to land, or a big project we're trying to land. And so really, it's just that season. But the biggest thing for me that has helped is not letting those heavy seasons become the norm, because that's the temptation. Because it's, hey, I can produce at this level, or I can produce at this level. But if I'm producing at this level, if I'm saying yes to this, but I'm saying no to something else, and that no is usually my family, relationships, my physical health. And so sometimes I have to be at this capacity, but this is kind of setting like, this is my norm, and this is where I have to be to do these other things well.
What's the norm?
40 on average, but I get to design. And so in that, and kind of tying into the networking thing, I mean, I spend a lot of my time in team meetings. I spend time with clients, but I also spend a lot of time with, I'll have 3, 4 meetings a week built into my work week, where I'm meeting with mentors or, guys, I would say brothers, or prospective clients. Actually, I wouldn't even include those in there. I've got 3 or 4 mentor and kind of brother or mentee meetings built into the week, because relationship is incredibly important to me, and mentors have been just absolute life changers for me. And so I really spent a lot. I mean, so this week alone, I've got 3 mentor meetings, and then 2 meetings with, guys I would consider brothers who I'm kind of doing life with. And so I include that into my work week, because kind of 8 to 5 is the time I give myself away from my family. And I think that it all fuels itself towards building the businesses, because part of being in my position requires that I'm growing and I'm being challenged and held accountable. And you can't have that if you don't have sounding boards from different angles helping you kind of walk through different life scenarios.
You know, there was a podcast I listened to with Naval Ravikant. Do you know who that is?
I don't know that I do.
So Naval Ravikant is a angel investor, and he's like pretty prolific guy at Silicon Valley. He started AngelList. AngelList is like the LinkedIn, but for startups, and they connect investors with startups with technical founders, and like they help you build your teams and all that stuff. So pretty cool company,
Cool.
super successful guy. And in like 2015, he kind of turned philosopher in a lot of ways, and is a great thinker. Like he's got some amazing things. I was listening to a podcast of his once, and he said there's one little line that stuck with me. He said something like, if my name ends up on the side of a hospital building, I'll know I overshot. And meaning, and the way I took it, I don't know what he meant, but the way I took it was, if my name's on the side of a hospital wing, like I'm that wealthy that I'm donating hospital wings, too much of my life was about money. Too much of my life was, I allocated too much of my focus, attention, effort to that domain of life. I have so much more than I ever need or want. And so what I took out of that is kind of like pegging, like, what's my income number? What's my number? Everyone's got a number. It's like, that's the number where I could say, like, I have fulfilled everything I need to in the domain of money. Yeah. And then, you know, I'm not going to over allocate time and energy and effort to that domain of life because it means I'm under allocated. I could reallocate that somewhere else. And I would way rather, for me, like overshoot with relationships, family, love, my health, than overshoot on business. And it's hard because, like you said, there's a draw to do more. There's more, especially once you've got that entrepreneur itch. So like, it's something I have to constantly, I mean, I love business. I love pursuing opportunities. It's fun and exciting, but also like, I don't really need to do that. And I'm forgoing something else. So I'm sharing that just to, you know, for everybody listening, but also just, you know, for you, because it's so easy, because you're getting to that point where you're like, dude, I really don't probably need, you know, or you're getting closer where it's like needs are met. So at this point, it's like a choice. And beyond needs, I mean, more than needs are met. Soon it's like, all the money I ever need has been met. And I've got this 10-year window where I've got all the time, 90% of your time with your kids by the time they're 18, right? That's, you spend 90% of your time with your kids by the time they're 18. Man, I'll work when they're 19. I'll start working again when they're 19. You know, like I got a long run ahead of me here. You're younger than I am, quite a bit younger than I am. You got time, you know? So I think it's just important to keep that in perspective for people, that it's like, you've got your whole life to work, you know, you just got to make sure like your needs are met, and then like things are growing. And it's not hard to grow your company on a reasonable schedule, you know? So, you know, you can work hard, or you can work smart, or you can do both. And if you got to do both for a long time to be a billionaire, you know, to build something gigantic, you got to do only one of those for just consistently, and you'll build something huge. You know, like I think you could just work smart for 10 years and you'll build something huge, way beyond what your dreams would have been, you know? So that's more like my take on it is like, dude, you don't need to overwork hours. You just got to make sure you're really good with the hours you do work, and let that growth compound for 10 years, and you'll have exceeded whatever goals and ambitions you had.
Dude, and I love that you bring that up, because that's something I've been spending, as I turned 30, kind of leading up to, I've been thinking through like what I want this next decade to look like. And like you said, like that entrepreneurship kind of bug or whatever, it's constantly saying like, hey, you know, you could go do this, you could do this. Well, what if you put this into it and you could scale? The question I keep going back to is like, why? Like, why am I doing this? And I think something that early on really helped, and that I've that we've now implemented for all of our companies, is our mission statement, and that's bettering the lives of families. And so whenever we're thinking through what we're doing, that's the question that we go to is, hey, is this bettering the lives of families? Is it bettering the lives of our families? Right. And so, there's a financial component to that. But the biggest impact that I can have as a father is being present.
Right.
It's not
your kids don't know how much money's in the bank account.
Yeah, and they don't care, and they won't care. Kind of like what that guy was saying. If my name's on the side of a hospital building, if I wasn't there for them,
Yeah.
and yeah, and that's something, having mentors and having brothers to do life with who I can share and say, hey, this is the man I want to be, who can hold me accountable to that, because the temptation is constantly make more, make more, make more, thinking, hey, I have to have more. But in reality, man, like my kids just want me. My wife just wants me.
Yeah.
They don't they don't want the nice cars and whatever else. And so that's yeah, I love that you bring that up, because that perspective is so often overlooked. That the thing is you think of like Grant Cardone, it's the hustle, 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 make money, make money, make money. Well, for what? Like you never get to see your kids, and that's, I mean, isn't that what all this is for? And if not, then what's the point? Yeah, it's the mentality of what does it profit a man if he gains the whole world but loses his soul? If you make all this money but don't have any purpose for it. And so that's been on my mind lately. And I've one of my goals this year is I'm interviewing 30 guys between the ages of 40 to 60 to hear. And there's just two questions. It's, what did you do well? And what would you do differently in your 30s? And so I've started that process. I've got like probably 6 or 7 done so far. And it has been, I'm starting to see themes, and I haven't had one guy yet. And some of these guys are, from a career standpoint, they're high performers. They're business owners who are really successful. I've not had one tell me, man, I wish I'd worked more during that decade. And instead it's been, man, I wish I'd spent more time with my wife, or I wish I'd spent more time with my kids. And I'm starting to see this theme from guys who I really look up to and respect. And so hearing that, I'm like, maybe just making, a ton of money over the next decade isn't where I need to be focused. And like you said, because I was back in February, I share a lot of stuff with my wife in terms of like how I'm feeling. And I was like, man, I feel a lot of stress because I'm looking at these companies and I'm seeing their potential. And I'm also seeing all the work that's going to have to go into getting some systems implemented and getting everybody rowing in the same direction. And I was like, staying up late at night thinking about it. And then I don't remember who I was talking to. I was talking to he's been a C-suite hospital exec, a mentor figure for me. And I was sharing this with him, and he's like, why are you putting so much pressure on yourself? Like you're the one who's setting this bar of, hey, I need to have all this in place in 6 months. He's like, why? Like, what's the point of that timeline? Whereas if I work faithfully and work smart and, over the course of 10 years, things should work out okay. As opposed to being like, oh, well, they've got that. I need to get that right now. How do I get it as fast as I can? You know what I mean? Because that's what I end up seeing a lot.
There's also, it's also based on an assumption that if I don't set that bar and I don't work as hard to force it to happen, and instead I slow down and enjoy the process, those are two different approaches. And there's a fear to going with the slow, steady, enjoy the process, like I'm not going to make it happen, or performance is hindered. And I don't know if that's going to be true. Because sometimes good decision-making can make all the difference. It's a decision that makes the biggest impact on a business, not the hours worked.
Yeah.
Like we're definitely born and grow up in like cause effect, like harder I work, the more I get. Like it's very in one, out one, but it's not. That's not actually the way it all works. It's not it. It's not one input gets one output. And sometimes slowing down gets a better result. Enjoying the process gets a better result.
Yeah. No, 100%. And that's something I think that kind of early on that I realized. And like when I was forced out of the field essentially because Vera was in the hospital, my time shrunk, but the impact of my decisions increased
Right.
because
Right.
because of my role. And I've I don't remember exactly where I heard it, but I had somebody say, essentially take the gross revenue of your company, divide that by 52, and then divide it by 40. That's your hourly rate that you need to be producing as the leader of the company. And so now when I'm making decisions about, hey, what do I do? What do I not do? I'm thinking, well, is it worth X number for me to be doing this, to me personally or for the business? And that's been really helpful because I could go out, we've got a pour going on at a project. I could be out there working on it, but is that producing X that I'm supposed to be producing for my company? No. And so there wouldn't be a point. So I could be working really, really hard, but not actually be moving the needle at all because I'm not doing things that are effective and important for what I need to be doing. And that's been a mentality shift because it's easy to hop in with a fire extinguisher. Yeah.
Well, you could take that number and just the way I think about that same principle is that's the average you're worth. That's the average, but there's some things in your calendar that are below that number right now because not everything in your calendar is not equal. There's the things that are on the low end in your calendar, and then there's the things on the high end. And I don't want to do anything less than what's on the high end. So then you could take that a step further and say, okay, but that's just taking this year's revenue. But if I look at 2 years, it's even higher.
Yeah.
Because next year is going to be bigger than this year. And if you take 10 years, it's even higher. So like if I look at my hourly rate, every hour that I work on something else right now, it's delaying the most valuable hour of my career, which is the last ones. And so it's almost like, what are those going to be worth? And if the work I'm putting in is not forwarding that, I'm not doing it. It's why like I wouldn't do one-on-one consulting for almost any amount of money. Because I'm like, dude, I could be putting that into what I'm building because the thing I'm building is the thing that's going to be the most valuable.
Yeah. And that was I remember the moment where I decided I wasn't going to pick up another paintbrush. And, I was at a job site and I was doing a walkthrough and there were touch-ups and, I was like, that's not my role. And not like in a haughty way of like, oh, I'm too good to pick up a paintbrush. But it was, if I do that, I'm taking away from this. And I've preached that to our project managers. I tell them, hey, you're not like, I don't want you picking up a hammer. If you have to pick up a hammer, it's because you didn't do your job thoroughly and plan. And I remember it was cool. One of my young PMs over in the residential construction company, the first time I saw it like really click, there was some water in a basement on a job site that needed to get vacuumed up. And I know that the temptation there was, we'll go get a shop vac, go vacuum it up, eats up 3-4 hours of his day. Instead, he sent our cleaner over there. And so we're paying her $18 an hour and I'm paying him closer to $40 an hour. And he got it. He's like, that's not my role. I can do things that are more important, that produce more. And that's kind of, I think that's one of the biggest things that I learned, and anybody getting started in their entrepreneurial journey has to realize is, hey, it's not like I'm better than this. It's just saying, what can I be doing that's going to move the needle for my company more importantly?
You got to keep firing yourself. I had to do that with one of my partners this year. I was like, hey, dude, from now on, you're not allowed to talk to this person or this person or this person or this person in your own company. You're not allowed to talk to them. They talk to this person. That person talks to you. Like, you do not talk to that. You don't involve yourself.
Yeah.
Stay out of it. Because there is a temptation to work more than you need to. And you've got people, you hire people so that they'll do the job for you. You don't need to do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, absolutely. And I know you asked about like the director thing. Like that's kind of what it's been is I realized like, hey, I was directing the painting company and I was doing a sucky job at it because I was busy with the residential company and busy over here. And I realized, I need to bring somebody who can come in and do this better than I am. And I think that's something that gets overlooked is like, it's like you want to hire somebody who does the job as good or better than you. And that's something I don't think I'd realize because I always thought, oh, well, hey, I could do this better than anybody. In reality, I'm realizing actually I'm not sure that you could. Yeah. And that's been like, just finding guys and focusing on the character and the culture component is massive, and I cannot preach that enough. I remember I was wrapping up 2020, and I had 5 painters. I had a lead and his second gun, and then my brother-in-law, a former soccer player of mine, and then some teenage guy. He didn't last very long, needless to say, but I ended up letting my lead and his second gun go because they didn't fit the culture I wanted. I remember wondering in January 2021, did I just make the worst decision of my career? Because I've got 3 guys who have no painting experience working on all of my jobs. But that commitment to culture brought in a new lead in February of that year and a new second gun, and then a new sub that year. And between my former soccer player, that lead who we brought in February, and that new sub, those are our now 3 highest producing sub crews. So they're each leads of their own respective crew, and they've all bought into the culture. So when it comes to the director thing, like finding somebody who's better than you at leadership or whatever the role specifically calls for in that director role, I think is the biggest one. And then secondly, committing to culture is just absolutely crucial. And what I've found is, I don't have to be the fireman. I think that's the temptation for a lot of entrepreneurs is if you carry a fire extinguisher around and you're like, oh, hey guys, I see you're doing this. And then a little flame pops up and you're immediately pulling out your extinguisher and putting it out instead of saying like, hey, maybe they can do it. And so kind of just taking a step back and saying, hey, I'm going to put my fire extinguisher away. I'm not putting this fire out. Even today, I was talking to my director of the painting company, and there was a client who was, they were having some difficulty with. And I texted him and I said, hey, text me her number. I'm going to call her. And I thought about it and I called him. I said, hey, here's maybe what I would say. I'm not calling her. And because I hired him to take care of that. And you know what? He did a great job. He didn't need me to do it.
Right. Hey, I'm curious, because we got to wrap up here in a few minutes, but I'm curious what your thoughts are on the different narratives around, because we talked about this before, around time management, life balance, hustle culture, all that. What are your, because that was something that you actually brought up to me. What are your thoughts on that? What are the conflicts? What's your view? I'm just curious to see if there's something there for us to chat about.
It's a tough one because I know and I was thinking back to it because I had a guy who's thinking about starting a painting company reach out to me and kind of asked me about my experience. And I was like, well, the first season I was busting it. Then again, I was also a teacher too. So I was working kind of two jobs. And so I think that there is a season where you have to work hard and put in some hours. But what I told him is going back, I think that I hindered my growth because I thought I had to just work hard. And like what you talked about, the working smarter approach, I think there's a way to do it without having to completely sell your soul and work 80 hours every single week. Especially in the sub world, now you can go out and start a painting company and just focus on selling and project management. You don't own a single paintbrush. You don't do any of that. You focus on finding good subs. You focus on marketing. You focus on sales. You focus on project management. And all of that can be done in a normal kind of in a normal work week. I think we look at, and I'm on LinkedIn a lot, and that's where a lot of narratives get pushed. It's either like the one where it's like, hey, work all the time, or hey, I never work. I live on the beach. I make crazy amounts of money, and I think that there's fallacies in both of those, because the one of them is just, hey, I just work hard, but there's no why to it. And the other one is, oh, I don't want to work. I'm not willing to put in the work. And I think there's the seasonal approach has really helped me. A guy I follow on there, Mike Beckham, he's the CEO of Simple Modern, which is a hydration company, water bottle company. And his content has kind of helped me navigate this, because the dude's doing some massive deals, and he's involved in his company, but then he's also able to take time and be with his family. And like what you said, like you're in the spring and you're kind of like, right now it's focusing on systems and how am I ensuring that the different companies are prepped. But then when the summer comes, you've got this landing pad where you've designed your schedule to be able to take that time. And I think the big thing is just prioritizing. It's prioritizing that time, because I think a temptation of mine, Eric, was that I would set time aside for my family, and then I would axe it. That was the first thing I axed. And then fitness and that kind of stuff. Like I would axe it, like, oh, I got to go do this. But the only reason I thought I had to go do it was because I'd set this timeline that said, oh, well, I have to reach this point by this timeline. But in reality, I was the only one setting that timeline. And so I think it comes down to just what's important. Like, why am I doing this? And because while I might say, oh, I'm doing this for my family, does my schedule, does what I do actually reflect that? I know that historically it hasn't. And
have you asked them, what do you want? And most people is like, no, because they say, what I'd like you to do is be home more, or whatever. I mean, I do that with my team. Like, that's where that's where I'll push, because I've got a good balance there, but I'll push myself in work, because I'm like, hey, I'm moving this business forward, not for me. I'm moving it forward now for my team, because I want to create more opportunities for them. But I haven't actually asked them, hey, what do you want? And do you want me to be pushing it this far forward? Or am I working for your imagined wants that I haven't asked you about? Dude, I think that there's merit in both those sides, but they're both preaching that it's like the way, and both sides meaning like work. Like Alex Hormozy's over there, like, you just need to work and weekends are available for work. And, I'm like, dude, that works for him, because that's like what he wants. Like, good for him. But he preaches it like it's the way, and it's not the way. And then there's people who are like, the way is work 5 hours a week and be on a beach and da-da. But I've done that. And it gets old. And so I think but for some people it doesn't get old. So I think the most important thing is, first, and this is where the whole design your life stuff comes from, but it's like, first, it's like, what is your intention in life? Like, let's look at your life. What's important to you in each domain? Now, how do you build a schedule that's consistent with that? And then I've got boundaries. And so for me, the thing I do a little different, I don't know if that's the right way to say it, but sometimes there's a season where I've got to get all this stuff done, so I work more. But I think that there's almost always a better, faster path if you're creative. So like, if I've got 20 hours and I say, hey, I want to get from A to B and I've got 20 hours, but it's going to take me 30. One thing I could do is just be like, all right, I'm going to work extra hard. Or I could say, look, I'm going to take 3 hours of that 20 and I'm going to figure out how to do it in 17. but being
Yeah.
more creative, leveraging more resources. Like I think that's what I'm in the process of right now, because what I do a lot of is I create a big goal and then I think until I'm like, okay, this goal can get accomplished with this plan that fits inside of my commitment, my committed hours and schedule and
Yeah.
resources, whatever. But then I add like huge commitments to it, where now I'm like, dude, I can't,
Yeah.
there's an example that's from Peter Diamandis. And it's not just Peter Diamandis. Who else talked about this? I think it's from the guy who ran Google X. I'm forgetting his name, but he says, if you've got a car that gets 50 miles a gallon and you want to build a car that gets 55 miles a gallon, you can make it lighter. You can optimize the
Yeah.
tires. Like you can make tweaks to the car to get to 55. But if you want to build a car that gets 500 miles a gallon, you have to destroy the whole thing and start from a blank piece of paper. And I think
Mhm.
that's the working smart. Like that's hey,
Yeah.
if you can't achieve your goals in the time allotted to achieve your goals, then you need to slow down and think, what's the different series of action to get to that goal in the time
Yeah.
allotted for my goal. And I think that's like that approach is just massively underutilized by people.
Yeah. Well,
It's
it's
just
like the
like,
toothpaste principle. It's
what's
like
that one?
if you've got like you got a tube of toothpaste, and you put it on your toothbrush. Well, then when you've got that tiny bit of toothpaste left, well, you figure out whatever way you have to get it out. And
Yeah.
I think what's been cool about the calendar thing is being able to say, hey, this is the slot that I've got to get this done. And it's my job to figure out how to do that. And especially for guys moving into leadership roles, kind of preaching that, hey, you should be able to do your job in a 40-hour work week. I tell that to my project managers because I fully believe that they can. It's just a matter of how are we going through and balancing. And actually, I'm going to be taking all of our leadership guys through the Design Your Life stuff this, I think Q3. And so I'm pumped about that. But yeah, it's what parameters, like what you said, that makes all the difference. Because otherwise, if you don't have those guardrails up, you axe things, and usually it's the things that are most important that get axed first.
Well, and you also, Parkinson's law, things will swell to fill the time allotted. So your work will swell in complexity and importance to fill the time you've allotted for the work. So if you give yourself more time, there's no shortage of stuff to do. You'll make things more complicated. You'll make them more complex. You'll drag your feet. You'll screw around more. But if you really tighten that up, and so it's this like, how do I create deadlines for myself that are bullshit, but I relate to them like they're real, the way you relate to going on vacation? When you're going on vacation, the day before vacation is the most productive day of your life. Like you don't mess around that day. There's no scrolling Instagram. There's no scrolling Facebook. Like you just get it done. But you don't do every day like that. But if you did, you could work half as much as you do and get the same output. So there's so many ways that you can get more out of your hours, but you don't. And that's like, so that just proves that like people are working more hours than they need to, because you could get more done in less time.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, 100%.
The Flow Research Collective, they do a lot of really cool work and on peak performance, and they've worked with some big organizations. They contract with like Facebook and Google and SpaceX and Deloitte, and their research and studies suggest like 35-hour work week is like the ideal work week.
Really?
Because their whole thing is like, not their whole thing, but one way to look at it is you work like whether they'll use the analogy of a lion or an athlete, but it's like, if you're going to be at peak performance, then you need recovery. And you got to have that oscillation where it's like, all right, I'm going to work really hard, but then I'm going to break. And then I'm going to work really hard, and then I'm going to break. And you need to work these recovery breaks in throughout your day in like 15-minute increments, but then like longer recoveries a few times a week, maybe a whole day a week, maybe a weekend a month, maybe a week a quarter, or 3 days a quarter. That's just like totally disconnect and recharge yourself. But you need that oscillation, that cadence between peak performance and then recovery.
Yeah.
And just more than 35, you're gonna be pushing yourself too much.
Yeah.
So anyways, that's kind of what I aim for, is less than that. Like what I found for me is like my perfect week is probably like a 20 to 25 hour week. I'm doing more than
Mhm.
that now. Some weeks I do that, but that's like where I want to end up, because less than that, I'm
Yeah.
bored and I want to be doing more, but more than that. And I'm like, I'd like to golf more than I am right now. And I would like to sleep in more than I am right now.
Yeah.
And that's my, like the 7 or 8 hours I need, 10 hours I need to claw back.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And how do you build? I'm curious, like your training into it, because I know like one thing for me is, like I said, I would axe my physical
Yeah.
training, and now I've actually built that into my work week. And so, like, I love
Hmm.
trail running, and so I actually have kind of 2 trail runs built into my work week as
Yeah,
kind of those, which that for me is a recharge. Um,
exactly.
and uh, and so, how do you do that on your end?
Same. Same. I was at the gym right before our call today.
That's awesome.
I usually I'll do the gym 4 times a week. Um, and sometimes it's Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. And then
Mhm.
sometimes I'll move 1 or 2 of those to the weekend. So it's 2 to 4
Yeah,
gym Monday through Friday, and then 0 to 2 on the weekend, just
nice.
depending on the week and how it's set up, and if I'm out of town and things like that. But that's the
Yeah.
recovery. So like once I've like
Hmm.
pushed myself a bunch, like that's the recharge. Like I work out, I hit the sauna, like I'll slow down, hit the steam room, like take care of myself a
Yeah.
little bit, and then I'm ready for like another 4 or 5 hour like high focus sprint.
Yeah, absolutely. That's something I've been really trying to get our leadership guys in on is, and our director of our residential company, he works out every day. Like he has his gym time, and it's during the work week because exact same thing. Like he's at his peak performance when he's taking care of his mind and his body, and so, but getting guys to understand that, I'm like, hey, like you can do what you need to do in 30, 35 hours, whatever it is, but if you're not taking care of yourself, man, you can work 50 hours and be underperforming. And so
Yep,
I think
exactly.
that's huge.
That's something we noticed. I was actually so the whole framework we went through with Design Your Life, like I put that together just for myself in like
Yeah,
2012ish, um,
that's awesome.
and it was really great. And so I started teaching some of the people I worked with, and some other people I worked with would start to embrace it. And then we did that enough that by like 2015, 16, everyone in our company that was like following that and implementing that framework was outproducing everyone who wasn't and was less stressed.
Really?
Like they had a better quality of
Wow.
life and they were outperforming. And it was so black and white that we're like, this is just going to become company policy. Like you have to follow this framework because you outproduce yourself. You following this framework outproduces and has a better experience of life than you not following this framework. Right. So
Yeah.
that's where it started to be like, dude, this is just what you do in our company and culture. And that's why obviously it's in the painting business pro stuff is it's both. It's not like you get both. Like it's all
Yeah.
positive. So
Yeah.
I've noticed that. So yeah, I mean, I think the more you can get that in with your team, like the better. And they're gonna stick around longer because no other companies take care of their people like that. No one else is like
Yeah.
fighting for you to have time with your significant other or take that trip or take care of your health. Like
Mhm.
companies are doing the opposite usually, like asking
Yeah.
more of you, like extracting more from you instead of like we're standing for our people to have everything that they want in their life.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. That's awesome. Yeah, that has me pumped to get the design your life stuff going with them. I think it'll be a mentality shift, but I'm pumped about it.
Yeah, make sure you note down to look at bringing those guys to the October event too.
Oh yeah, yeah. No, I'm planning on bringing our director out there and hopefully our estimator too.
Can't
Especially
believe
after
you're
being
broke.
out there, I'll go to that, and then I'm gonna go to the mountains for a few days and go trail
Yeah,
running out there.
make a trip out of it. October's amazing up there. It's really
That's what
nice.
I've heard, man. I'm yeah. I already told my wife. I said, hey, I'm gonna come back here in October and go to a
Yeah,
conference, and then I'm gonna go run. I'll be back 5 days
awesome.
later.
I love it, man. All right. Any last words? Anything else you'd share with someone who's I don't know, starting their business, run their business, working too much? Any closing thoughts?
You kind of mentioned it, but the network piece, I think, might be one of the most underestimated um, parts of business. And um, I know for me, yeah, I work hard. I know things, but who I know has been the most influential part of the growth that I've experienced, and so yeah, whether it's mentors, coaches, finding mastermind groups, that kind of stuff just cannot um, undervalue it. It has been absolutely just an absolute game changer. I can tell you one. Remember, I got a lead back in 2020, and I remember pulling it up on Zillow, and it was a house up on a mountain in our city that's very affluent. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to get to go bid on this. And go out there. And prior to that, I researched the guy who'd called me. And I learned a little bit about his background, and bid the job, presented it on the spot. And then afterward, I said, Mr. Kramer, whether you go with us or not, I would love the opportunity to meet with you sometime and hear about your experiences, your career, your background. And 4 years later, we meet every month. And through that one connection, and this isn't even an understatement, just through his one connection, we've generated, I think, probably going on 7 million in revenue across our companies. And I mean, absolutely life-changing, the connections that I've made through him. But it was all because I sought out a mentor and took that step with networking. And that was just it wasn't that, hey, can I make money? It was, hey, can I learn from you? And that I think is one of the most underestimated parts of business. So that's what I would encourage somebody to do, is to go out and try to find a mentor, because the network that you are in by proxy can change your life, and it has mine.
I'm with you, man. I mean, yeah, great. Awesome, Hayden. Well, yeah, thanks for joining me, dude. You're the man. Keep rocking. We'll talk again soon. I'll see you in October, and
Awesome.
have an awesome time in Norway.
Thanks, Eric. Appreciate it.
All right, brother. All right.
All right. See you.